You're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup with me, Roisin the Cleric.
And me, Paul Brophy. Roisin, who do we have on this evening? It's a very well-known face here in Kilkenny.
Well, Paul, as you know, we have a very popular Kilkenny lady who is certainly a woman of substance and a phenomenal woman at that. And that is our local county councillor, Mary Hilda Cavanagh. So, Paul, Mary Hilda Cavanagh, you're so welcome to the Irish Political Roundup.
Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be talking to you.
I suppose, Mary Hilda, we'll go back to the very, very beginning in 1973 when you were a young
74.
student in 74, a young student in UCD, and you decided to put your name forward to run for the local council in Kilkenny in North Kilkenny. I suppose, what was the motivation at the time to run at the time? Were you very political at that age, and did you come from a very political family?
I didn't come from a very political family, but I would have been aware of politics. My father would have been very interested in current affairs, so there would have been a lot of chit-chat about current affairs, and he listened to the news on the radio. Television wasn't around very long at that stage. I finished my degree in UCD in 1973, and Gareth Fitzgerald that time was the local TD, and he was also one of my lecturers in economics, and he got elected as Minister for Finance. And I suppose we were all kind of fans of his at the time, so I got interested in politics then. But I had a very poor understanding of how the system worked. I actually thought that you had to be a county councillor in order to stand for the Dáil. So I had Dáil ambitions in those days, and I thought, well, I've got to stand for the council, but I also thought that you'd have to stand for the council a couple of times first before you got elected. So I put my name forward in 1974. At convention that time, I didn't win the nomination. It was a gentleman much older and more experienced than I was who got the nomination. But about a month before the election, he changed his mind. So the organisers came and said, will you stand? And I said, well, I will. I've got my opportunity now, so I'll stand. And they pretty much said to me, if you canvass Galmoy, Patrick Johnston and Urlingford, that's all you have to do. Go into all the houses there and ask for a vote, see how I get on, and we'll take it from there the next time. But there was no next time. I got elected. I did a little bit more than that, but there were candidates everywhere. But I just happened to be ahead of the next nearest to me. And when he was eliminated, I got transfers, and it went on, and I survived. I was the last elected on the day, but I didn't mind. I was the fifth elected on the day, but it doesn't matter. As I always say to people, you don't have to top the poll, and you don't have to reach the quota. It's nice when you do. It's only nice for about 5 minutes. Because the next election, people say, "Oh, she had a surplus the last time. She doesn't need our votes."
Doesn't matter whether you get the first seat or the last seat. Once you're in, you're in.
Once you're in, you're in.
Exactly. So, 1974, you got elected to the county council, and you're still 49 years later. You're still there, which is a phenomenal achievement. What was it like in the early years there, Mary Hilda? I know there was yourself and Margaret Tynan.
And 24 men. And the top table was exclusively men. All the management team were men. Now, I don't mind. I'm very fond of men. So I didn't mind at all the fact that there were men. And they were very nice to me, very courteous to me. Some of them, they were more like father figures to me, even though there were some younger people there. But for anybody that was 50 then, because I was 23, I thought they were ancient. But anyway, it was only when Kieran Crotty died recently and found out his age, I realised that 45 or 6 or 7 years ago, he was only around 50, if he even was 50. But they were, in general, I was treated well. I was asked what committees, what my interests were. And my interests were farming and education. So I was allowed to go on the County Committee of Agriculture and the Vocational Education Committee. And there was a committee called the Scholarships Committee and the Library Committee, and I was made chairman of that. And I was very interested in libraries as well at the time. So I got what I asked for. But that time, the council was very much a part-time, just something you did on the side. You didn't have a salary or a wage. You did it on the side. It was an exercise of service, and you held down your full-time job. Everybody had a job. I mean, maybe 1 or 2 of them were pensioners, but in general, everybody worked. So the meetings were held we'd quarterly meetings of the council in those days. So we'd one every 3 months, and then we had, say, budget meetings as well, and then an odd special meeting. But they would have been held in the afternoons or the evenings or the nights. And sorry about that. And what, I've lost my train of thought. And then you held on to your job. I was a teacher, as were several other councillors. But now it's changed completely. There are meetings morning, noon, and night. Very few night meetings of the council, but you'd be going to community meetings and all the rest. But you, in my opinion, you couldn't hold down a full-time job and be a councillor. I don't know how it's done, and there are some people trying to do it, but I don't know how they do it. But they do.
You got elected in you got married in 1978. And
I did.
am I right? Yeah, you got married in 1970. Oh, you got married, and you had your first baby in 1980.
That's
and
right.
You were still, as you said, a full-time job. Then you had your baby there, your first baby in 1980. So you were working. You were a wife, a mother, and you were also working a full-time job as a teacher, and a young mother as well.
Yeah, those early years are like one blur, but I had a very supportive husband, and he's still around. And I had a very good mother-in-law, even though she was a very elderly lady, but she was a very active lady, and she was fantastic with the children. I didn't have a home help. I shared a house with my mother-in-law. She had her own apartment, and we had the house, the main part of the house. But like we all used the same stairs, and the children went in and out, when they came between both houses, if you know what I mean. And it just worked out very well. But like the days were manic long. But the demands from the council were an awful lot less. As I just said earlier, the meetings, you had very few meetings. Like if you had, on average, I suppose you had 2 meetings a month. Now you'd have 2 meetings a day. And the amount of stuff you have to read for meetings now is just phenomenal by comparison. And I suppose maybe there was always more stuff to be read, but somebody read it and told you what I remember in my early days, you were told how to vote on issues. You didn't, the whip told you how to vote. You didn't decide yourself. Now we'd have meetings among ourselves. Each group would have we've 3 groups, as you know, the Fine Gael group, the Fine Gael group, and the technical group. And they would meet and discuss things and come to a majority decision. I'm not sure that the technical group are bound by the whip, but our party would be, and so would Fianna Fáil. For budgets and things like that, But as I said, in my early days, I didn't read very much. I learned on the job, and I listened and learned.
And when you got elected first, Mary Hilda, there was yourself and Margaret Tynan. She was a phenomenal woman, and people go back and look at what she was involved in. Her input, into life in Kilkenny was huge. 7 times she was mayor of Kilkenny on numerous occasions. Would she kind of been like your first kind of mentor of sorts?
She would have been, and she was a very good friend as well. And she was actually much younger again than I thought, but she was a formidable lady. She'd been on the city council, I think is what was called then, from 1967, representing the Chamber of Commerce. She stood as the Chamber of Commerce candidate, but she joined Fine Gael for the 74 election, was elected. She was also elected chairperson on her first day in the council. That was a kind of a fight out between and an agreement, and the Workers' Party, I think, had a candidate who said he'd support a woman. Okay. And in that sense, that the die was cast in her favour, which is a very good chairperson. But like she was secretary of the motor company, Kilkenny Motor Company. Her brothers had died tragically, and she was cast into the role of director at a very young age in her own business. So she had a lot of experience, and she was hugely involved in all aspects of city life in Kilkenny.
Yeah, so. And in your early years, a young Phil Hogan would have been there as well. Of course, Phil Hogan subsequently went on.
He wasn't around. He wasn't around. His dad was there.
Sorry,
when I got elected first. Yeah. He was there when I was elected first, And again, he'd been a friend of my father's over many years through hurling and athletics and things like that. So he kind of took me under his wing and nurtured me along. And then tragically, he died quite young in 1982, I think, 1982. And Phil came along then, and he had all ambitions. So whatever ambition I had was well gone out the window at that stage. I enjoyed local politics, but I enjoyed being at home as well with my husband and children.
Yeah.
And to travel up and down to Dublin every day that time without a motorway, the Naas wasn't even bypassed. So it was just not on, and it wasn't going to be on for me to stay in Dublin either, leave my children behind me at home. Not on at all. So I stuck with local politics. I enjoyed it, and I'm still there, and I still enjoy it.
That's the main thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Mary Hilda, you talk about your husband, Eddie. He's a farmer. So you're also a farmer's wife, and you also help out in the farm as well. So that
I do. I do, and I did. But I like it. Like we were reared on a mixed farm, and like every farmer's daughter, you learned how to pick potatoes, thin beet, thin mangels and turnips, help with the haymaking, all those things. If the Lister engine, which was based on petrol, broke down, you milked the cows, you fed the calves, you did all those things. Then you walked 2 miles to school. But those were the things that every farmer's daughter did. It was very labour-intensive farming in those days. We didn't have a tractor. My father would have ploughed with horses. So, there would have also been farm help around, but ditches were cut with slashes and a bill hook and things like that. But it was very, very labour intensive. And then my mother would have shown us how to set eggs, how to know a hen was hatching, how to set the hen and lift out the hen so that she feed. Because if you had a hatching hen sitting on a nest, and when life comes in the eggs, the hatching hen would not get out to eat. She would stay there. You'd have to lift her out to eat. Otherwise, she'd stay sitting on the nest indefinitely. She wouldn't get out to eat and drink. We learned that those were the rules, So, like, life was very interesting, but life is very tough, hard work. So when I went to boarding school first, we weren't allowed home on November Day. And then they decided we would be let home for 2 or 3 days around the 1st of November. But we went home to pick potatoes by hand, and there were no rubber gloves, and there were no gardening gloves. And like your fingers ended up being very sore, and you were picking them sometimes in frosty mornings or whatever. But like that's what every other child did as well. So, you weren't victimized. To be called child labour nowadays, but I mean in those days it's good for it and healthy.
And that's where you got everyone always talks about your work ethic. So you really had strong work ethic from a very young child as well. And that's really held you in good stead up until now.
It does, and it gives you stamina as well. But when we went to boarding school, every minute of every day was accounted for. In the evenings, like we had exercise immediately when class ended. Then we went to study, and on a Saturday, then our job was to clean the school. And everybody had their own chores, and you were switched around every few months. So, it wasn't a bad idea at all. We didn't love it, but anyway, that's the way it was. We kind of were jealous of the lads in the boys' boarding schools. They played an awful lot more sport than we did. So, like St. Kieran's College was like where my brother went to school, which was the Academy of Hurling in Kilkenny. Like it's where they all learned how to hurl and hurl well in those days, like in the boarding school. And some of the finest hurlers that Kilkenny ever had came out of St. Kieran's College, and probably some of them out of St. Peter's and Wexford, the southern fellas. But like we learned how to do housework and how to do it properly and how to do it well. But then Hoovers came along, so and people don't polish floors in the old way. But anyway, didn't do us any harm.
So that's probably why you were a great person to be the vice-chairperson of the Kilkenny County Committee of Agriculture. So that really suited you being on that committee then.
I loved it, yeah. I loved that committee. Yeah. I went for the chair one time. I didn't get it. But I absolutely loved the Committee of Agriculture. It was a forum where you represented farmers with the agricultural advisors, and like people would say to you, would you ever bring up this at a meeting? So anything that you thought that was wrong, or that the people you represented thought that was wrong, it was a local forum, and it was abolished and became very centralised. And now Teagasc is the advisory service, and you pay for it every year. It's no longer a free service. At that time, it was a free service to all farmers.
And when you think about
And
it, farming, Ireland being an agriculture country, and farming, it really does build and create the local economies, especially back, years ago. The local farmers really sort of contributed to the local economy.
Yeah, and farming still is a huge contributor to the local economy. The farmers supply the raw materials for places like Glanbia and Cllr, as it's now known, and for the meat factories and all that kind of thing. They provide the raw material, and then the jobs are in the processing rather than in the farming. But farmers make their own living out of producing the raw material, and they do their best to do a good job and produce what it is. If you don't produce what the people want, nobody will buy it from you anyway. But everything from the ordinary, say the milk that's produced in bulk and produced in enormous quantities, to the organic farmer, like that doesn't produce as much, but he produces organic, and there's a market for that as well.
And Mary Hilda, you were chair of Kilkenny County Council on 3 occasions. The first time was in the early 80s. What was that like? Because as we all know, that was a pretty particularly tough time in the country. There was very little money around. What was it like to be chair of a council at a time when resources weren't very, very plentiful?
It was very, very tough going. When in the earlier years we had, say, 2 or 3 estimates meetings and the estimates were passed, and the biggest input we have into the estimates is levying the rates in those days. And that time we eventually got the estimates through at about 10:30, if I remember rightly, on about our 5th budget meeting. And it was the last day that we had to get it through, or the manager would have been writing to the minister to say, these people won't pass the rates, send in the administrators or whatever, the commissioners, and to run the county until the next local election. I was just very, very unlucky the year I was in the council in relation to the estimates. And I think I'll remember for a long time. But it was an enjoyable year, but it was a very busy year for me because I'd had a baby a few weeks before I took over as chair. And the baby tended to be minded in the car in the market yard, waiting until I went out after a meeting to feed the baby. It was a tough year, but it flew, and it was enjoyable, and it was an honour. It's always a great honour to be chairman of your county.
And as years progressed, the economy, obviously Ireland started to do well, more resources, and the changes in local government. Has there been changes for the better? Because nothing's going to stand still. That's a given. But the changes that have taken place over the last 20 years, have they been for the good, or have they
I suppose some of the good
limitation?
Some of the good and some are not. I think the farther you move local democracy from the people, the more disinterested the people will become. Because we eat and drink and sleep politics, we think everybody else should know what's going on as well, but they don't. And it was only when our part of North West Kilkenny was stolen from us and handed to North Tipperary for electoral area or general election purposes that I realised a lot of people thought I was moving to Tipperary automatically with my area. They didn't realise that the county is still sacrosanct for county council reasons, which is, I think, the most important arm of government locally. But I think that having huge electoral areas like ours, we have 6 councillors, but our area goes from Goresbridge up around in a horseshoe shape around the city, all across the north and back down the other side, Kilman and Ballycallan. I would much prefer if we were a 4-seater and a smaller area where you get to know all of your people personally. I know, I'd say, less than a half of my area very well. I have a knowledge of the rest of it, but I wouldn't know if they were talking about a particular road in Goresbridge. I would not necessarily know where that particular road was or a housing estate there either. But if you're talking about anything in North West Kilkenny, I can visualise the road and the house and everybody in it as well, because you have an opportunity to get to know it intimately. That's the way it is.
You're probably into certain, say, up around, say, Urlingford, Johnstown, you're probably at a stage where, like, say, James Patterson back in the day, you could go into an estate and you know exactly who's lived
Yeah,
there and
he
who
had
used to live there and what
exactly.
the issues are and stuff like that.
He had a huge knowledge of the city. He knew the city backwards from one end of it to the other. But that's because he was there a good while, and because he was
Yeah.
interested in his father's time as well, and he was just a good politician as well, which made it his business to know. But our area is now too spread out, and I know from listening to comments sometimes on radio from other councillors when they're referring to what I consider my part of the world, they don't really know it. They make statements that they think are right, but they're not always right. They're not right with their locations. They're not right, but they couldn't be expected to know them. It couldn't be done, especially for new people that have to get to know the ropes as well. But look, I think it's working reasonably well. The members of the Kilkenny County Council work well together. We have, as I said, the three whips, and we discuss a lot among ourselves. And then we take the news back to our groups and we reach a consensus. And that's why we bought that property, or allowed the council to borrow the money to buy the property, because it was a democratic decision and the majority thought were in favour. But they may not all have been in favour the first day, but we talked it through, the pros and the cons and everything else as well. And that's how the story began.
Yeah,
And local government and
absolutely.
local government and local county councils are so important for the national politics, aren't they? Because I remember when we were talking to you, when we were interviewing John Paul Phelan, you always said that, you know, when you were, what you liked about John Paul Phelan was he always came down and listened to what was happening with the county councillors, because local politics is very, very important.
I agree with you, and I think somebody said to me, I know who said it. I was on the radio program with Brophy, you know, the singer, and he said what he loved about Irish politics was that every man, woman, and child had access to their local politician and their national politician. If somebody wanted to meet their TD, say from this side of the world, and they came to me, I'd set up a meeting and make sure that they did meet them face to face. And if the TD was good, well, then he'd do his research or she'd do her research, and they'd know who they were meeting, their background, and what it is they wanted, and everything else as well. And I think that's very important. But if your TD is away from you altogether and you don't know them, either even to look at them, and that's what's maddening me about like the change in the constituency boundary, is that it would be very hard for people. Like around here, we're so near Tipperary. A lot of people would know some of the TDs there. But like when it comes to people in Freshford, Lisdowney and Tullaroan, I wouldn't expect them to be mad about the Tipperary TDs and identify with them and all the rest. But I think if they put the name Northwest Kilkenny or Kilkenny North in with Tipperary North, I think we'll buy into it then and we'll feel a bit of ownership in it. But I can't see how a candidate of any party or no party, if they put their name on the ballot paper, I couldn't see how they'll be elected. There won't be enough votes. I think the Tipperary lads might stick with their own, and that would, you know, you'd be then just a sacrificial lamb for the constituency. But if at least if the name was part and parcel of the constituency name, like North Wexford and South Wicklow, or gone in Wicklow, Wexford, Wicklow, whatever they're called, and there's no problems. But I mean, we heard last night that when Roscommon was tagged on to East Galway, or part of Roscommon was tagged on to East Galway, they weren't even going to include Roscommon. It was going to be the East Galway constituency. But they created such a row, it was East Galway, Roscommon, or vice versa. I don't remember now which it was. So I think it has to be the same for us. And I believe John Paul Phelan has argued that at government level.
It will be fascinating to see what the turnout will be the next election in that part of Northwest Kilkenny that have gone into.
I can tell you now, if they don't put in the word Kilkenny into the name of the constituency, I wouldn't say the turnout would be more than 20%. That would be my guess. Wow. I have still to find somebody that will vote in the next general election. But somebody sent me a clip recently, and it was Barack Obama talking to his people after he had gone out of politics, and they were threatening not to vote. And he said to them, like, all the work that I've done over all the years will be in vain if you don't go and vote. Your vote is important. Everyone's vote is important. And you've got to see it that way. And sulking and staying at home and saying, I'm not going to vote for anyone at Tipperary, you'll get what you deserve then, rather than what you choose. That's what I'd be saying to the people. And when I'm canvassing next year for my own seat, I'd be saying to people, please reconsider. There must be somebody there you prefer to the rest of them. And somebody you don't like at all, leave them down to the bottom of the list. But please vote.
Be interesting to see will the Tipperary-based candidates, will they actually venture into North Kilkenny and
I can
canvass it?
assure you, one of the sitting TDs has already ventured into North Kilkenny. He was invited to a meeting.
Alright.
He turned up to the meeting, and he had his research done before he turned up. And I'm not going to plug any TD talking to you, but he did, and he'd come from Dublin and go back to Dublin the next morning, but he did turn up. So, like, they're very interested in laying hands on our votes.
I could
But
make,
that's the only way
make an
that-
educated guess who it is, but
I'd
I
say you
won't say
could.
it.
And you wouldn't be wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Mary Hilda, you know, you're talking about John Paul Phelan, and you told when I was talking to him for his interview, and he said that when he first joined politics, you were like his second mammy in politics.
Yeah, but I'm about the same age as his mammy, I'd say. And I'm older than the mammies of some of the current. I was talking to Cllr one day, and I said, "What age is your mother?" And I discovered that his mother was 5 or 6 years younger than I was. His mother. So it kind of puts them all into context. But it's like I thought that some of the and I wasn't too far out. I thought that they were geriatrics when I got there, but some of them were there a long, long time when I got there. The late Paddy Tehan was there when I got there first, and Jack Welch or John Welch, he was from Castlecomer. And there were some very oldish men there. I'd say they were over 70 then, but I mean, I'm sure the young crowd coming in now think there's old women there, but anyway, so be it. But there are several of us that aren't too far apart in age now at the moment. Like we're pensionable, you know what I mean? But that doesn't make us any lesser councillors.
No.
We have the experience, you know?
We,
And I think you need a mixture.
that.
You need a mixture. You need a mixture. You need young and the not so young, and then you need experience as well.
Because we need that steady hand, we need that wisdom, that knowledge and experience. I think even more so now, in the world that we're living in, we need that steady hand, the steerships, and for that wise counsel.
You probably do, and you also know from experience that you can't, at election time, I was too innocent to know that you could make promises in 1974. And when people said, what are you going to do for us? I just said, I'm going to work hard for the community. That's all I can promise, because I really don't know what I'm going to be doing, but I will work hard. That was my only promise. It's still my only promise. But other people went in and told them they'd abolish the household charge, they'd abolish the development charges, they'd abolish all sorts of things. And people believed them. But sure, they got in, they discovered they were just another cog in the wheel. They weren't the full wheel at all. So they had no ability to do all the things that they'd love to have done. The same as political parties now that are all things to all men. Any party that says they lower taxes and increase expenditure should want to be a fool to believe that. But some people will believe it, and they like to believe it. They like to think that there is obviously a hidden formula for giving everybody more, but it doesn't work like that. We know it. And like I'd be saying that to them, you know, my people at estimates time, to the group, especially the first year after a local election when you have new people. You know, if you want to spend the money, you've got to raise the money. Simple as that. You can't say shouting and roaring at the government to give you more. It doesn't work like that. You've got to raise some of the funds yourself, you know.
Again, that comes down to your economic. You have a teacher's degree, and if I'm right, an economics degree as well.
No, the subjects I did in university were history and economics. So I have the economics degree, and I'm a history degree. And I did French in first arts, so I taught some French as well. But I did my dip in Maynooth. I lived at home and drove them down every day. And I actually did English as one of my methodologies. I'll never know why, but anyway, I did.
And for that economics background, because I was talking to, when I was interviewing you for the radio, to Maya Fitzpatrick, and she said that that you both went to many conferences together, and that you still and were always held in such high respect, no matter where you weren't. But what she said was, as chair of the county council, when it came to finance, you would always put the public funds first and treat it like it was a household funds. And one thing you hated was squandering of money. And at the end of every year, the county council had to sit down and go through the budget, and you would go through it like a fine tooth comb.
True.
Yeah. You know,
Yeah, it's nice that people remember it that way. No, I think I think that's the way that the state should be running the economy as well. Because after all, it's somebody else's money, you know, the state are spending. It's the taxpayers' money.
yeah.
And if you over borrow, well, the next generation and the one after that again have to pay it back. It's the same at council level. If you borrow too much, you'll have too much interest to pay. And that eats out of your current budget.
Yeah.
The same as the household. I learned the hard way. You see, I bought a car before I had a job. And my sister was going to Australia. She wanted somebody to buy her car, so I did. And I had some money from a summer that I spent in America in 1972. I worked 2 jobs and I came home full of money, literally full of money. In that time, I had, I think, just like $1,500 after 4 months. You could nearly build a house with it at the time. That was back in 1972, and I still had some money that time, but I had to borrow some of the money. And then I crashed the car and bought the next one on hire purchase. And then that was worn out when it was time to get the next one on hire purchase. And then I got married. And it was our car after that then. And it just went in the overdraft. But I learned the hard way like that. It's so easy to spend money when you're borrowing it. But then payback time comes. And I suppose every young person learns that and learns it the hard way, you know.
Mm. And also it was Maya Fitzpatrick said when it was time for upgrades of the roads, you would say, let's see how hold on now, there's a queue here, let's see how far we can make it spend and make it work. You were always a good one to take a good joke.
I don't know about that. Sometimes I get a little bit het up with other councillors from my own side and every other side, but like we all remain friends at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I'm still very friendly with some of the ex-councillors from all parties, Mary included, I might add, from the Labour Party, and several of the Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael councillors as well. Like, we keep in touch. The Christmas cards come and go, you know, which is nice.
Yeah.
And because life is about friendship more than politics, isn't it?
Yeah. And that respect and working together for the good of the county. And it's always about delivering for the county and your constituents.
That's right. That's your job, to do your best to improve the county for the next generation and for the present generation as well. And the other thing then is, in your representational work, to try and ease the burden on the people that come to you, to take, when they have a problem, to talk to them about it and to try and lighten it on them, because you have more experience about how to deal with it than the ordinary person has. And that's all you have to do. Do your best for them. That's all. They don't expect miracles, you know, but they do expect you to do your best. You do it.
And as regards the representational work, Mary Hilda, that you do, you know, people come to you with a range of different issues. Do you find that people are coming to you now with a lot more issues that would say be outside the remit of a county councillor?
They are, but anybody that comes to me with something that's central government related, I would have passed it on to John Paul Phelan's office. And going forward, I'll be passing it on to an office in North Kilkenny, if it's that part of my area. But if it's over farther, where people will still vote in Cllr or Kilkenny, it'll still go to somebody's office. And I'm not bigoted enough not to contact John McGuinness's office on occasion as well, whenever it suits. Whoever I think can do the job, well, then they'll do the job for me. And I find them great. And over the border, then half my parish is in County Laois, parish of Galmoy. Yeah. So I would get work there as well. And I would always give it to Charlie Flanagan's office, and it would always be delivered on as well. Should they do their best as well? That's all they can do. And in Tipperary, I would have had work over the years because Tipperary is very close to here as well. And you just pass it on. But in my early years, I didn't know who to pass on anything to. So I probably went to Clr with everything. But you learn, and you learn how to do your own council work, which is very important. That's something you should not expect the TD's office to do for you. Now, some people do expect the TD's office to do everything, and they pass over everything to them. But that's not your job. Your job is to deal with the council yourself, get to know the officials. And it's over time that happens. It doesn't all work overnight. You know, you don't become very knowledgeable in the first few weeks. But by the time your first term of office is over, you will know who does what and how to go about doing things. And if you work with the officials, instead of kind of giving them a hard time when they don't do this, that, and the other, but if you work with them, they're fantastic, absolutely. And we have a great team in Kilkenny, and we've been very lucky over the years. Like, I have a great working relationship with all of the officials, from the new person to the more senior person. I think I'm going to pass out now with the heat here.
It's wild.
No,
Mary Hilda, you gave up teaching in, now I stand to be corrected, in 1988, but you are still very passionate about education.
That's it in a nutshell, Roisin. I gave up teaching for personal reasons. We'd had a very tragic bereavement here. Our eldest son died suddenly before he was 6. So I worked for 1 more year, but I just couldn't cope. So I gave up teaching, but I stayed in the VC, which is now the Education Training Board, and I'm involved with the school in Johnstown. I chair the board of the Cllr in Johnstown, and I've seen that school grow from under 300 to almost 700 now. Now, I'm not claiming any credit for anything there, except for fighting for better facilities for them with ministers over a long number of years until they got a new school, and looking for extensions for them, etc., and representing anything they asked me to bring up at Vocational Education Committee meetings and now at Education Training Board meetings, because I'm on the Education Training Board, because we merged with Cllr and took responsibility for training as well as education. So instead of VEC, we're now ETB. And I've been lucky enough to be appointed to the National Committee, which is based in, we meet in Piper's Hill in Naas. I served there for some years, and I'm back again now for the last year, back on that body again. And you could raise issues. Like, I'll give you an example. One of the things that I think is seriously underfunded at the moment is the alternative leaving cert. I'm not LCA local. You know what I'm talking about. It's not as academic as the other one. But I think that there's not nearly enough funds put into it. There's not nearly enough staff allocated for it. So I'll be making that point at our own next meeting, but then I'll bring it up at national level and get it taken to the minister's door. Because Simon Harris has fierce ambition for everybody to be given a 3rd level education. Whether you're going to sweep the road outside when you're finished is irrelevant, but you should be given the opportunity. And I agree with them. Everybody should have the opportunity of going to 3rd level. It doesn't matter what job you do afterwards. But if you're going to go through the further education college and you're going to do your applied leaving cert, that's the word I was looking for, your applied leaving cert, well, then the resources have to be given to the schools to make sure that they can have an applied leaving cert. And I think, I'm nearly sure it's 16 are the number at the moment. But if you have, say, 24 wanting to do it, you can't put on 2 classes because you won't have 32, and you're only given the resources to run a class and a half, but you can't have a half a class. So I'd be saying to the minister, when you have, say, a class and a half, allow you to have 2 classes to make sure that anybody that wants to do it can do it. I think that's hugely important. And that's what that's my next hobby horse for the education end of things, because I think we're reasonably well resourced, you know, in the ordinary 2nd level. There has been an awful lot of added extras added in, and especially during COVID, and an awful lot of help for students with special needs, and the AST units are there, and there's been an awful lot of improvements. You know, there's a place for everybody, let's put it that way. Whereas there was a place for only the best and the brightest in the past, which was all wrong.
And Mary Hilda, you were on the board of governors of the old Waterford Institute of Technology. It's now subsequently merged with Carlow to form the Southeast Technological University. How do you think that, you know, merger of those 2 institutions is going to be for the region as a whole? And Do
I
you
think
see Kilkenny getting some sort of third level campus into the future?
I'm not too sure what Kilkenny will get. I'd be inclined to think that Kilkenny will get a big research facility, which is massively important. I can't see any faculty being brought to Kilkenny because there are adequate buildings in both Waterford and Carlow to cater for the needs. But that being said, we're getting, I think it's 40 million that's been allocated for a College of Further Education. And I'm not sure, I think that will go to a greenfield site. I'm not sure, but I think it will go to a greenfield site. But it needs to start moving ahead now. The money has been allocated, but like the Kells Road site, that it was thought in the beginning that that might suit, but it wouldn't suit. You don't need buildings with dormitories in them for classrooms because it just wouldn't have worked. It's much more useful for
you list the buildings on the site too as well, and
exactly.
when you add a listed building into any mix, it's just headaches.
It just wouldn't work. But I think having a technological university in the region is absolutely vital, because foreign investment doesn't care that the word technological is in your title, but they do care that the word university is in your title, because that indicates an awful lot of research. And there's an outreach campus in Wexford from Carlow, so now because it's all in one place, there's like if you're in South Kilkenny, you're very close to Waterford. If you're in North Kilkenny, you're not a million miles from Carlow. But I would love to have seen the agricultural faculty, which is closest to my heart. I thought that might have come. I thought that might have come to Kilkenny, but it's not looking good. But we'll await. We have made a very good submission from Kilkenny County Council looking for a campus. We'll await and see what happens. But agriculture would fit perfectly. But then we are getting, I suppose, if we're being practical about it, we are getting a veterinary college in Kildalton. Like, I'm not sure how much of your degree you'll do in Kildalton, but you certainly do some of it. So we have a third level campus in Kilkenny, only that Kildalton's so far south and we're in the city and north of the city, we don't think that way. But like, it is feasible to actually travel down from here to Kildalton every day if you had to.
Yeah, absolutely.
As some young farmers do.
Simon Harris, he announced there earlier on this year that there are going to be alternative paths to third level, where you will start your early years of your degree in one of the colleges of further education, which, as you said, Kilkenny has been allocated money towards, and then you would ultimately finish your degree
and on another year
in a third level university. So that's
the same as what's happening at the moment in Kildalton. You did your diploma in Kildalton in 2 years, and part of your diploma was your green cert, and all the other certs that you need to be a farmer now, your spray cert and all those other odds and ends, like if you don't go to an ag college, you've got to do anyway. You can't function without, you can't buy spray without having a spray cert and safety cert and all this kind of thing done. But if you go to Kildalton for 2 years, you'll have all that done. But then you can go on into WIT and do another year, and or 1 year for your ordinary degree and 2 years for your honours degree, and you're off away in a hat then. Like that's what it's all about. But that joined up thinking has been there for a while, but it took a while to work with Kildalton to get that going. That just didn't happen overnight either. And you see, we all want everything. We all want it now, but it does take time. Like the merger between whatever you want to call it, between Carlow and Waterford, like that was a 20-year incubation period. Like I was on a committee for about 10 years, and we were fighting for the Technological University of the Southeast. But everybody, like, there were differing opinions. Waterford were a much bigger college than Carlow in the early days, but Carlow caught up very fast. So it had to be on equal terms, because that's the only way that any merger will work. You have to work with your partner and could have the respect. Yeah. You can't just say, and the fact that the headquarters might be Waterford makes no difference in the wide earthly world, because as we know, since COVID came, with team meetings and Zoom meetings and every other kind of a meeting on the internet now, location doesn't really matter that much.
Mary Hilda, adult literacy is very, very important to you. And you always, again, you quoted when I spoke to you before on the radio, you said Your father was passionate about education, and he used to tell you, you can learn all you can while you can.
Yes, and he made me do chemistry for my, well, 5th year. And I eventually came home and said I couldn't go into chemistry at all. It was the first year they did it in our school, and they were trying to get the magic number of about 10 to do it. So I was enrolled, but I hated it absolutely. And all he kept saying was, learn all you can while you can. But that time we were going to do past leaving cert chemistry after 1 year. And I reckon I wouldn't pass. So around Easter, I decided I'm out of this. But we did Latin. We did Latin after 1 year. We did leaving cert Latin after 1 year. But that time you had to have Latin to go to university.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that changed and you had to have a foreign language. And I'm not too sure that that rule is still there now. I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
I
No.
don't think you have now. I think
No.
I don't think you do. But in our day, French was the language that was done in all schools. Now it's our local school in Johnstown. Now it's Spanish is the flavour of the month, which is great because more people will go to Spain on holidays than will go to France on holidays.
True.
And it'd be nice
True.
to have a little bit of Spanish, you know. But
And
anyway,
adult literacy, Mary Hilda, it's extremely important because there still are, what do they reckon?
Yeah.
Is it 1 in 6 people would have a literacy problem? And when you struggle to read, life is can be extremely difficult. Even simple things
Yeah.
like filling in a form, like reading the instructions on a bottle of medicine, you know, that can be.
it's unbelievable.
My own
But you
mom's,
need,
my own
yeah.
mother's compared it to like living in a foreign country, like we wouldn't know the language or anything like that. It's
Yeah.
very difficult to kind of to function when you have a
It's
literacy
actually,
problem.
yeah, it's a great comparison because when we went to Spain a few times on holidays, but sure, we couldn't function because we knew no Spanish, like, and they knew no English and we knew no Spanish. But like that, if you did buy a bottle of medicine, you would know how to read the instructions on it. You'd make it out a bit from your knowledge of French, but like being not being literate, and there are a huge number of adults who are still not literate, and there are people who have their leaving cert who are still not literate. Now, they may have not have passed their leaving cert, but they would have gone almost that far. I find that nearly unbelievable. But now, from the day one, literacy and numeracy are incorporated into every subject in every school in the country. It's part and parcel of so that nobody will fall between the cracks. But they did fall between the cracks before. And I've had to write letters for people who had to write letters but couldn't, and wouldn't admit to their own children that they couldn't write. They didn't mind coming to me because I wouldn't be telling anybody anywhere. It's something that's, you know, very secretive, and people feel ashamed, which is shocking because you shouldn't feel ashamed that nobody realised you weren't able to read and write, and here you were 8 years in a primary school and left without being able to read and write through no fault of yours. It was the fault of the system that didn't recognise that people have different learning abilities. But I qualified as a literacy tutor way back about 20 years ago, but I never got a student because it's all based in confidentiality. And every student they found for me and said, Mary Hilda Cavanagh will be your tutor. They said, oh, no, thanks. She knows me. I know her. She knows me because of the job I had in life, you know. So I wasn't prepared to drive more than, say, 25 miles, but still your name had been known. Like if your name was just Mary or Hilda or something, but when it's the double barrel name, they tend to know who you are. But I'm sure it'll be different now. But now the voluntary literacy tutors are gone. They're all professionally qualified now, which is probably better. And people wouldn't have as many inhibitions, like, because they're teachers as opposed to voluntary people. But like, there's great work being done, like by the ETBs and then by the National Association, like the NALA, it's known as, and it's based in Dublin. But great work being done and great help for everybody and anybody who wants to learn it. Yeah.
And there's a lot more knowledge of conditions like dyslexia, which is so important.
I remember a girl that used to come out every day. The spelling exam used to be in the morning or whatever, used to be given out in the morning in the big room in our school. And the girl used to come out with her hands under her arms with the pain of them from being slapped every single solitary day because she didn't know her spellings. And she obviously had the problem of not being able to learn her spellings. There was no help, and the teachers didn't recognise that she had a problem. And that I can still see her in the playground. You know, so it just shows you that there was no understanding of of any, like, and people would say, if you let something fall, they say you're clumsy. But it's as if you did it on purpose. And sure, and we all know now, I'm not sure which of the dyspraxia or I don't know which is which.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all it is, like, you know.
Mhm.
And the same way
I'm
with numbers.
dyslexic. I'm dyslexic and I cannot spell to save my life.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
But you don't need to. The computer will do it for you. But yeah, yeah,
Thank God for technology. And when it comes to technology, I'm blind.
yeah. And as well as that, it's not an illness. It won't kill you. You know, if you must have a problem, and very few people are so talented that they have no problems, no nothing, no illness, no nothing. Like, if you must have a problem, that'd be something like that you can handle now that it's understood. But it must have been extraordinarily difficult for children in the old days, you know.
And it's
But you're just
amazing
like children. Yeah.
when you look at famous people who have dyslexia, there's a lot of very, very wealthy business people, other entrepreneurs, creative people,
Exactly.
that
That
have
we're completely illiterate.
I think it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's when you have a condition like that, be it dyslexia or dyspraxia. I have dyspraxia myself. You learn to adapt and you learn to think outside the box and be creative. So that's probably why a lot of people say with dyslexia, dyspraxia, they've gone on to become very good entrepreneurs.
Yeah. But you see, they've talents, you know, they've other talents, hidden talents that might never have come to the fore otherwise. But as well as that, there are so many illiterate people that have gone on to be fantastic businessmen. They couldn't sign a check. It was all somebody else who signed the check for them, you know, but they understood business as long as they had good ears and good heads on them. So it's not the end of the world. But in this day and age, like, think of like not having the joy of reading, but now they're audiobooks, so you're not stuck.
Yeah.
And you have podcasts and things like that you can listen to, you know.
Mary Hilda, I was talking again for the radio to your colleague David Fitzgerald, and he said that you are a force to be reckoned with, but when you say you'll do something, you will go over and beyond to get it done.
Yeah, well, I believe that. Like, I hate broken promises or false promises. I hate it in other people. They tell you they'll do something and then they don't do it. I'll always forgive people for forgetting, because it's very easy to forget, but that don't have no intention of doing it. Say, I'll do that, yeah. They have no intention of doing it. I don't like that. And I try not to do it, you know, not to be that way myself. I try that when I tell somebody I'll do it, well, then I will. And I'll stay chasing it down till I have it done. But occasionally I do forget.
Yeah.
And sometimes, yeah, if I'm away from home and say I'm driving and I have a hands-free set, so sometimes between Dublin and here, you might get 3 or 4 calls. And by the time I get home, I wouldn't remember their problems, but I'd ring them back and say, you rang me on the way down from Dublin, I wasn't able to take it down, you know, tell me again. Yeah. And like sometimes people would ring you and they mightn't ring you maybe for 2 months. And it's so much easier to say, just remind me again why you contacted me 3 months ago. And then it'll all come back and then you'll remember what you did about it or didn't do about it. But you did. And if you didn't do something about it, just say, I'm awfully sorry, I totally forgot, but I'll deal with it now. That's what I think you need to do. Anyway, that's just me.
Writing it down is the most important thing, because
I know
a bad note is better than a good memory.
Exactly. Any word at all often just lets you know. Yeah.
Mary Hilda,
yeah.
You started off your politics and you got married and then you had your children. You have 3 children. Is it Brian, Anne-Marie and Claire?
Yeah.
And now you're a grandmother. I
am. Sarah lives in Miami now. She's Irish Consul General. She was sent out last October to open a consulate.
Wow.
Which was officially opened by the Taoiseach about 2 weeks ago. You might have seen a picture of the Kilkenny people last week.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Pride, Mammy.
But yeah, we're very proud of her because she'd only been in the department 2 years when she got promotion. She was assistant director of human rights or some such thing when she went in as a first secretary. She'd had a life in politics before that. She was Charlie Flanagan's special advisor when he was Minister for Foreign Affairs and Minister for Children. So she was lucky that she had a very good grounding gut in foreign affairs. So she did the exam and she was panelled and eventually she got a job with the Department of Foreign Affairs as the first secretary. And this is her second job now. Consul General for Ireland in Miami. Then Anne-Marie's a lecturer in St. Pat's in Drumcondra, which is now part of TCU. And she has 2 little girls. One is 5, one is 3. And then my son Brian is farms here with us, and he lives about 3 miles away. And he has 3 boys, Edward, John, and Andrew.
Oh.
That's it. That's the family. That's 5, and that's it, I think. But anyway, I'm happy to have 5. You know, suddenly from, like, Brian was married 8 years ago today, and at that stage we had no grandchildren. And now we have 5, so the 8 years have been good years. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I mean, sure. Sorry. I'll give this to my long-suffering husband to answer.
Yeah.
And so what do you do for hobbies? You probably have no time for hobbies, but you took up crocheting during the lockdowns.
I did. Sorry about that now. I did, and yeah, I crochet. And I read a small bit, not a lot. But I crochet. I crochet baby blankets. They're simple. You start in the middle and you go round in circles, and eventually you have the finished product. And they're a nice present. People love to get them because they're a personal present, something that you've made for them, that you've taken the trouble to make for the particular baby when you know the baby was on the way. And yeah, I find crocheting very relaxing because, as I said, you're going to be behind the television, stay going. So you get very good at it. And that was something I learned when I was in the novitiate. I don't know what you learned, but that's what I learned. I learned how to crochet, and we used to do some of the very fine, you know, the fine cotton, the kind of like the edges of tablecloths and things like that. But I find that very hard in my eyes, so I just do the wool crochet. I did a couple of bedspreads during COVID, and they tend to last. I've one in my bed at the moment that I made before I got married, so near enough to 50 years ago, but they last forever, like. And it was made with bits and scraps of wool. In those days, we weren't as well off as we are now. And you used up your odds and ends, like making little squares and then sewing them all together. But that's it. And I read a small bit. I don't play golf. I don't play bridge. I don't do any of the things that my age group do. And we don't go out very much. So that's it. I go to the
right, Mary Hilda, you work 6 days a week and you take probably about a week's holiday a year, and that's you are the definition of a full-time public representative.
Yeah. I sometimes read for the Monday meetings on a Sunday, but I try and keep the council work away on a Sunday. But if sometimes stuff comes in, like, you have to see where people are coming from. Sometimes, say on a Friday evening, a problem arises for somebody. There are no offices open, council, Dáil offices, TD's offices. There's nobody to be found, only your local councillor. And sometimes they could ring you at 7 or 8 or 9 o'clock on a Friday evening. Well, that might have to be set in train on a Sunday for Monday to know how you'd handle it. And sometimes I worry a bit about it. But in general, I try and keep Sundays kind of away from council work. But if somebody wants to see me, I'll go see them as well. And I'll take calls as well. Yeah.
As you said when you were on a podcast with Brezzy, the thing he liked about Irish politicians in particular, how contactable they were.
Yes.
I remember watching a documentary about Michael Healy-Rae, and somebody they rang him on a Christmas day because they know they would get him. I suppose, have you ever been contacted at a kind of a mad hour?
I have been contacted one snowy Christmas day. There was a heavy fall of snow and people couldn't get out. And but that time, in fairness to the staff of Kilkenny County Council, we have an emergency number, and if people are trapped in their homes, well, we can contact the number and they'll have staff on duty. But I can't remember being contacted. I'd say one Christmas day, maybe 2 in 50 years. That's not too bad. But like, you'd be contacted on Sundays, but you'd be contacted at all hours of the day and the night. Like, my leg is going into cramp now, I'm sitting too long. That's what happens when you get older.
Well, we won't keep you much longer because we've taken up a lot of your time, Mary Hilda.
I wasn't be doing anything else tonight.
Mary Hilda, you once said that politics was like the religious life. It's a life of service. And, you know, there's not one person I've met would ever say a bad word about you. Everything is just like, what a real great woman of the county and of politics and of service to the people of Kilkenny.
Well, isn't that lovely to hear? And it does keep you going. But
Yeah.
it's like hurlers, if they have a bad match and everybody's criticizing them, they tend to have another bad match because it leans on them.
Yeah.
But if people are happy with what you're doing and you're doing it your way, well, it's easy to keep going then and doing it your way, isn't it? You know, people have been very kind. And even though I'm not looking forward to the campaign next year because I'm afraid my energy levels won't hold up. But then when I start on the road and people are so nice and so kind and ask you in and say they're delighted to see you, it keeps you going, you know. So I couldn't say enough in favor of the people I represent for their kindness and their niceness and their friendship and their generosity and of course their votes, which is very important as well. But there you are.
I'm
Yeah,
just looking
yeah.
at my notes. Would I be right in saying you were first one across in 2019, the first one across the post in the election?
In 20, when was that? The last election? No, I wasn't. There were 3 of us elected on the first count.
Were
I
you?
wasn't. Pat Fitzpatrick chopped the poll. I didn't. I chopped the poll, I think, maybe twice or 3 times back a bit, but I actually couldn't tell you now when it was. I know I chopped the poll in 1980, maybe 91 and 99, and I don't know after that. Maybe I only chopped it twice because Morris Shortly came and he was a force to be reckoned with. But then he had the whole north to himself. I had to share it. There were 3 of us. For 15 years, there were 3 Fine Gael councillors in North Kilkenny: John Brennan, Catherine Connery, and myself. We were very lucky. Catherine lived in the middle and we lived at either end. So we never had a cross word. You know, we worked very well together and we're still very good friends. That's the way to have it, you know. Because as I said, friendships are more important than politics at the end of the day. Now, when I was young, I couldn't understand that. I couldn't understand the Fianna Fáil lads and the Fine Gael lads travelling the one car to Dublin. I couldn't fathom it at all, how they could. But you find out, you know, when you get to the council yourself, you might do the same. And friendships are important. And you will make very good friends across party lines.
Well, Mary Hilda, we're coming up to the hour. What would you, if you were to give 3 pieces of advice? I know we said this in the other interview, but to young people coming up, if you were to mentor a young county councillor or someone going for politics or public representative, what advice would you give them?
Unless you're prepared to work hard, this is not the job for you. Unless you like people, you have to be personable. I got that gift from my mother. Like, my mother was a shopkeeper in Johnstown before she married my father, who was a farmer, but she was a very friendly, outgoing person. I picked up her personality. I'm told I did anyway. So I like to mix with people. I like talking to people. And despite I talk too much, but I also am good to listen. Unless you have that characteristic and are prepared for hard work, that's nearly it. Generous with your time, I think. That's pretty much it. I don't know what I said to you the last day, but I've often thought about it since, you know, since. But if that's not what you want to, and like to help people, if you want to do those things, there's no better life. In the old days, if you wanted to do all those things, you'd go into the convent and be a nun, and you'd work for the good of people for the rest of your life. But you'd work in a celibate life, in a life of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and do what you're told for the rest of your life. And that's what you did. And you did it, and you thought then you had a first-class ticket into heaven when the rest of them outside, you know, were very far down the line. But you'll find out the hard way, like that. You might be the furthest down the line, and the mothers of half dozen children might be the top of the line when it comes to heaven. But they give after. I don't believe this. My leg cramping. It's like as if somebody's telling me, "Shut up, stop talking." But that's what I'd say to people. But don't be afraid to put your name in the ballot paper. And anyone that puts their name in the ballot paper, I have great time for them. I don't care who they are, what their opinions are, and whether they're one issue candidates or whatever, but at least they have the courage to do it. And that's what democracy is all about, putting your name on the ballot paper. That being said, I hope not too many are going to put their name on our ballot paper. It would be grand if there was just the 6 of us.
Well, have you any more questions before we let Mary Hilda go and get a cup
and
of
you
tea?
don't walk up and down the kitchen, yeah. I'm not used to sitting down. I've been sitting down now for an hour and a half nearly. Not used to it.
I suppose, thanks a million for coming on, Mary Hilda.
No problem at all. I greatly enjoyed the chat.
And I suppose, please God, if you are successful, next May, you'll be 50 years a county councillor. Does those things? Do you ever look back and think, "Gosh, wow, no, this is a phenomenal achievement," or "Where did the time go?"
You don't, but
you
you
know,
can't believe it's when you say it out loud. You know, when somebody says to you, "How long you're there?" and you say since 1974, and they think, "Oh God, nearly the middle of the last century." Time goes so fast. But then somebody said,
yeah,
"Time goes fast when you're happy. If you're miserable, time doesn't go fast."
yeah,
So I really have no complaints. I'm glad I went into politics, and I'm glad I stayed in politics. Let's put it that way.
yeah.
And the
And I
people of
hope to stay.
Kilkenny are glad you went into politics. And you know what? You definitely are a phenomenal woman of substance. Mary
Oh,
Hilda
thank you so
Cavanagh.
much. Thank you so much, Roisin. That'll give me the impetus now to stay going.
Absolutely.
But you know what? It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on again, and we wish you the most success. And may you be past that post in the next election as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks, Roisin.
Mary Hilda Cavanagh, thank you so much indeed.
Thanks a
Thank you,
million.
Mary.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks very much,
You're
Paul.
welcome.
Slán. Slán.
Slán.